But first, I won't ignore the first day of this job summit. In fact, Trudy will run through the key developments today shortly. But I won't be overdoing the coverage either, because every time I looked at proceedings today, all I could see were union leaders with their hands out for more money. More money for workers, for childcare, for skills training. When that's in isolation, they're all terrific ideas. But they are all totally oblivious to the state of our economy, to the lack of real productivity in this country, and oblivious to how entitled they actually sounded. This is no time to whack up wages for the sake of some selfish feeling of being hard done by during a pandemic. We're still yet to emerge from this once-in-a-century pandemic. And the only sane mind in the Great Hall today, certainly one that said the right thing, was the Treasurer, Jim Chalmers.
And what we've said in being upfront with people is that we would like to make room in the budget for as many of these good ideas as we can, but we need to be honest and say that when you've got a budget which is heaving with that $1 trillion in debt that we inherited, you've got to prioritise, you've got to sequence.
Exactly right. Like everyone watching this tonight, you know how it works. You can only live within your means, which is another reason why I find the timing of a job summit right now to be as illogical as the demand for higher wages. We are at full employment. Most of the 800,000 job seekers, well, they don't want to work because there are 480,000 job vacancies. We need to talk about immigration numbers, processing work visas better, which they did briefly today, altering the Pension Act, finding ways of making the cost of production cheaper, not more expensive with higher wages, and creatively establishing additional sources of national income. That's the summit that needs to be held today, not the one they're holding at the moment. And it's so disappointing that the spotlight is focused in the wrong corner. How is government dealing with that debt at the moment? How are they dealing with the painful cost of living, the pressures from inflation? Well, we know the answer, they are not. And what I find glaringly obvious is that the leadership this week, from the beginning of the week, illustrated very clearly how bereft they are of ideas about how they will pay for the massive spending program they're promising, especially on defence. You see, Defence Minister Richard Marles is in the UK today, as I mentioned, looking at nuclear-powered submarines. And just before he left, Marles also spoke about purchasing the in-development B-21 stealth Batwing bomber. He's looking at 28 of those aircraft, and at $2 billion a pop, that's $56 billion for air defence alone. Now, yesterday, my colleague on Sky News, Kieran Gilbert, he was right on the ball on this, wanting to know where all the money was coming from.
Do we have to accept more offshore builds as a principle and limit local content to try and keep a lid on local costs?
We will see supply chains being more global is really the point I'm making. But we definitely need to develop increased industrial capacity in Australia to add to the net capability of the three AUKUS countries. You know, we couldn't be happier with the way that process is playing out, and we are confident that we will be able to make the announcements that we said we would in the first part of next year.
He didn't answer the question. With all respect to our intrepid Defence Minister, who I've got to say seems to be committed to a real boost in defence, he doesn't know how his wish list will be paid for. His mission is to purchase, not fundraise. And let me take you back to earlier in the week when similar questions were asked of Anthony Albanese. This is Kieran again.
Can I ask you on the reform side of things? Our country's facing huge costs, NDIS, aged care, talk of another 28 joint strike fighters. Are you going to have a crack at the reform necessary to pay for all that?
If you look at the projections of what will be required over a period of time, with rising defence expenditure, the NDIS, a range of other expenditures that will be required, we need to have a debate about how we pay for that over a period of time. But I've said very clearly that our focus at the moment is about jobs and skills and the summit we have on. And that in part is answering the question as well.
No, it's not, Albo. Any gains you make in workforce productivity or wage resolutions won't touch the sides on the astronomical debt, the expenditure and procurements facing your government. Won't touch the sides. So we have a debate about it, do we? In other words, he doesn't know. They made grand promises on childcare, for instance, that will require a $5.4 billion spend alone. $5.4 billion. Where's that coming from? As we creep into the $1 trillion debt zone. To get anywhere near what's required, they either need to come clean and drop a raft of big-ticket spending policies, which is what got them elected, you'll recall, or undertake major medium to long-term reform, as Kieran mentioned, which will increase productivity and generate some new sources of revenue. That is the choice. That is the big-ticket item that needs to be discussed. Think about what that debt looks like, can you? What is $1 trillion? Would Albo even know what $1 trillion was? Well, I'll tell you. It's 1 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0 0. Physically, $1 trillion would stretch from the earth almost to the sun. The government can only hide behind this cosy job summit for so long because by the end of October, they'll need to produce a budget with most of the answers. How they intend to pay for what is a mammoth platform of promises and super spending. Back to the press club again, and given a second opportunity to answer the central question, Albo was ducking again.
When this term are you willing to have a debate about how you're going to pay for not only your ambitious policies, rising expenditure and obviously the $1 trillion of debt? Will further tax reforms be part of that debate and what could be on the table?
Well, we're having a consideration now of our budget in October and you'll see that, our commitments, how we're going to pay for them, our analysis as well of the expenditure that we've inherited, going through line by line, trying to knock out waste and rorts which are there. So the job of reform is never done.
Stop. Call off the fight. He has no idea. Finding the money through weeding out rorts and waste will not by any stretch pay for what the Albanese government is staring at. History tells us that taking a razor-gang approach to existing programs and spending is extremely constructive, but is rarely able to save a government any more than a couple of $1 billion. Again, just childcare will cost them $5.4 billion. So waste and rorts, Albo? Drop in the ocean. And that's why Treasurer Jim Chalmers has been saying no to absolutely everything, even the most obvious cost of living measure, which is extending the reduction in fuel excise discounts. He knows more than anyone in the entire House, certainly more than anyone in the Great Hall today, how dire the books are for the government. And right now, as the PM and the unions have showed us this week, they have no answers as to how they intend to pay for all of this and pay for blind election promises and a monstrous commitment to defence spending, wages, childcare, the lot. It is much easier, of course, to have summits and reviews and commissions, but at some stage soon, the Prime Minister has to face the real music. It was so much easier in the cheap seats of opposition.